Hello and welcome to REDD's Business and Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Barnes, with my co-host, Brad Ferris. And today we've got a special guest, Robert Hudman from Knight Solutions, who specializes in construction software, specifically Procore, and is an expert in his field. So I guess to start, Robert, did you want to introduce yourself and your background before we touch on Knight Solutions? So you being the managing director, but you want to go into how you got to here.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Appreciate you having us on as well, Jackson. So my background is very much construction. I spent about 15 years working on the ground. Actually started as a labourer digging holes way back. Worked my way through and then eventually sort of found Procore at a certain point out of frustration, probably more than anything. There's a lot of manual processes which anyone in construction to be aware of. And that process led me to purchase Procore. I was Australian customer number 4, and I think it was number 4 even outside the US. So that was 11 years ago. And
customer number 4. Wow.
Yeah, I feel pretty old saying it, but there it is. So I ended up implementing it at 2 different companies, including the late and sadly closed Condev, which was obviously interesting turn of events for me personally. And then, sort of was going for number 3, so Procore number 3 implementation, and I got the call from Procore, couple of random guys from the US, the VP of sales, and he said, "Hey, we're gonna start an Australian operation. It's going to be our first international expansion, and we'd love to have you on board. You've been a really great customer." So, half a dozen very keen US sales guys get sent over, and we worked with them. We built that office up over 3 years, from 2017 through to late 2019, from the original 6 or 7, and I think it was about 120 when we left, and I think now it's just under or around about 180, 190 staff down in Sydney.
So that's Procore in Australia, which you kind of started the Procore
Yeah, so we helped roll it out. So it was a team effort, of course, it wasn't just me. And then I did that for 3 years. It was an amazing experience, travelled a lot. We did sort of covered the APAC region, a lot of travel back to the US as well for obviously a US-based company. And after 3 years, I sort of felt like I'd done what I could do. I'd sort of hit that point where I thought I've sort of worked through, been promoted through, achieved a lot of great things and enjoyed the experience. But ultimately, I think what was niggling in the back of my mind was I was feeling more and more disconnected with construction after sort of 3 years, and I wanted to get back to the coalface and work with construction companies directly. So from that idea, late 2019, so just pre-pandemic, fantastic timing for me. Worked out well in the end, but started Knight Solutions, and its goal is to really bring that vision of Procore to life, because there's quite a lot under the hood in terms of Procore.
What we might do actually, might be good, Robert, if we touch on what is Procore first, just for people who are listening who don't know what Procore is, and we've mentioned it a couple of times, and it's a main theme in this. We've got some of our clients in the construction industry using Procore, being one of the leading global construction software. But did you want to introduce Procore and who they are first?
Yeah. So Procore has been around for, they've just went 20 years last year, so they've been around for a while. And they're a construction management cloud-based software offering. So they started out from someone who actually was in construction and sort of got frustrated in some respect like I did, and they decided to solve it. So what they've created and built over time is a cloud-based system that really touches on virtually all aspects of construction. They sort of don't go really near the design side so much, but in terms of project management, but also the pre-construction in terms of bidding and tendering, and then really trying to tie together the entire project delivery team. So we're talking about multiple companies and everyone working together on a single project. And really important for Procore is it's not just for the team in the office, it's very much a field or site-based operation as well. So you can manage that whole project with Procore, and a big thing for them is a huge amount of integrations to connect technologies into the system.
So mobile phone apps, iPad apps?
Yeah, all the way. As a Windows fanboy, I was sad they sunset their Windows app a year or 2 ago, but they have Android, iOS, so they've got it all covered.
Yep.
And they're very much in terms of connecting everyone into that single experience to deliver that project.
And financial integration with...
Yeah, so they do have their own financial tools. They're sort of focused on financial solutions for the project team. Yep. They don't go near accounting, but they connect into couldn't tell you the count, but a dozen or 2 dozen accounting systems itself.
All the main ones, I imagine. And that's important because in construction, there's so many different elements to it. Like you got to manage so many like subcontractors, and then there's the actual physical assets and estimating, and then through the project, like a whole project management suite as well. So I imagine over the years, Procore has developed a bucket load from when you were first rolling out to Australia, and now, no doubt.
Yeah, it has definitely evolved over a long period of time. Yeah. It's the product is, I wouldn't say it's morphed. It's sort of naturally evolved, and it's got quite wide, as I mentioned, in terms of its scope from pre-construction to kind of handover. But a huge amount has been put into the investment. I think when I worked there, which is sort of 4 years ago when I finished up, I think they already had a count of around 600 engineers in-house.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, they're producing a lot of product.
Yeah. So no doubt you are definitely an expert in everything Procore and in that kind of construction software field. So we should hopefully get some good insights out of today's podcast.
Great.
So I guess that 4 years ago when you exited Procore, then you started Knight Solutions.
Yep.
Which you are the sole director of, is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
And now managing director. Do you want to go into, I guess, why you started Knight Solutions and then what you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, as I mentioned before, I think the key driver was to get back to construction. So, probably, I don't know if I'd take the step back into working in construction, but I wanted to be around it. I think it's a great industry. It's very tangible, very physical. You can see what you produce. So the reason was there to sort of, for myself to get connected back into it, but more and more I was, technically working the pre-sales team. So I was showing people how they could choose Procore to purchase it. But what I wanted to do was see that through. So often, you hand it off to the implementation team and you really don't get to see it through. So Knight Solutions is also an avenue to take the customer from the decision to buy Procore to actually bring that vision to reality itself. And Procore, technically you can literally turn it on and use it the next day. It is sort of an out-of-the-box solution, but it is obviously the same for everyone in the world, and not everyone in the world is the same in terms of what they do. So we sort of decided that a business that really understood construction and had been where they'd been could configure, set up, train, and standardise their process, and they could actually bring that vision, which Procore are really good at painting, but bring it to life in a real way. And the motivation was there to do that through Knight Solutions.
So what were the gaps initially that you were solving from Procore to switching on, hey, a 50-person construction company turn on Procore? What are the gaps that Knight Solutions solves?
Yeah, I think the big one is, so Procore is basically a tool-based product. So it's got a whole bunch of tools. It's got RFI tools, document tools, so on and so forth. Some of the tools are really obvious in terms of how you would use them. They're kind of a one-to-one relationship. We have a request for information. We use a request for information, or known as the RFI tool. But contextually, you need to look at construction, because construction, from all the different stakeholders, the complex processes, the very, very low tight margins that you have, there's a lot of processes that don't fit straight into Procore. So it's a square peg, round hole. So we spend the time to understand the business itself first. Let's forget about Procore. I mean, great, you chose it, but let's set it aside just for now. And then we get to know exactly how they do their processes, what's important, and how it's going to work, so we can actually understand that. And then we show them how that's going to translate into Procore. And it's not always a one-to-one. You might use several different tools to solve a change management issue or deal with a safety factor. And once we've understood that, then the process, for us at least, is straightforward in terms of, all right, now we know what you need. We can configure, set up, and get that account completely ready to basically be exactly how you guys do business. And then obviously there's following things like training, standard operating procedures around that. But it's understanding what's different, because although construction is kind of construction everywhere, wherever you go, it's a lot of it's similar. Every business, and I guess it's in every industry, but construction, it's surprising me, still for me, how often they still do things differently. So it does need to be customized for each customer.
Yeah, it makes sense. Everyone's like that. Like, we're a technology service provider, I guess. So we like to think we're different to everyone else.
As I'm sure we certainly are, mate.
Yeah.
So I got a tour of the office. I was pretty impressed. So.
Well, that's good.
So can I just ask a quick question? Because I really don't know anything about Procore.
Sure.
The licensing model, is it kind of a one-size-fits-all, and then it's up to you to extract all the value from that license by engaging someone like you to really extract all the value out of that the software offers, or do you have to add modules? And
Yes, a good question. So at a very high level, Procore is it's not seat licensing, so it's an unlimited user model.
Okay.
So when you purchase Procore, you can add as many users as you want. That includes any external users as well, and all those user bases, they're all supported by Procore equally as long as they're in your account.
Yep.
And then kind of when we talked before about kind of what Procore is, it has different product lines or SKUs or whatever you want to call it. So it has a project management, it has a quality and safety, it has a financial. So you choose based upon your business and what you're looking for. Do we need, and project management is kind of the backbone, so pretty much everyone gets it. But do we need project management and financials, or do we need the quality and safety with something else and maybe the tendering? So you choose the mix of products and you purchase the product lines.
So almost even from the implementation or pre-implementation on which models you should have for your business, you would advise on?
Yeah, so look, obviously Procore, as far as their pre-sales process, will evaluate and give you some recommendations on what you should purchase.
Okay.
And that's definitely with them. Most companies tend to figure it out in that process. It's quite a natural process. You kind of look at Procore, it's built for delivering construction. You look at the product offerings, and most people go, yeah, we need those 2 or 3. And there's kind of around about 5 or 6 when you break it down. And the pricing from a commercial perspective is based on 2 things. So it's the product line that you purchase, or the product lines that you purchase, and then your annual construction volume.
Oh, okay.
All right. So they have a pricing model. So obviously the bigger your construction volume is, the sharper the rate is. And I couldn't tell you exactly what it is, but they obviously have a floor price, but they do still fit really well with what Procore would call the emerging market, which is builders doing at least about 5 or 6 million up to about 20 million. It's still a value for you, and then it sort of goes up from there.
Okay.
So
cool. That makes sense. So at Night Solutions, did you want to touch on like when you started 4 years ago? I imagine it might have been just yourself, or you just yourself and one other person. Like how the team was started, and then where you're at today.
Yeah. So it was a solo operation. It's my first business. Obviously, I guess subject matter expert. I've been around Procore for about 12 years, doing nothing but that. So really comfortable with the technology. But I just thought, look, I feel like there's a need here, and we'll go service that. So I did start on my own originally. Did that for the first 10, 12 months, and then brought on Matthew Hickey, who is a gentleman that reached out to me. He's actually Brisbane-based as well. And he'd come from a place called Nicklin Construction. He had a lot of Procore exposure, had implemented Procore, so a very natural part of it. And he's sort of with us now as well. He's really kind of our senior consultant, working with the likes of some big customers like Ryman Healthcare and Fletcher Construction and those types of sort of high-level customers. And then we added a third person, Grace Duff. I actually worked with her and implemented Procore with her at 2 different businesses, including the late great Condev. And I reached out and said, look, we just can't keep up with the work. We'd love someone else on. But, as I said to you before the session, our conditions of having people on the team is very specific, and it's you need to know Procore, and even more importantly, you need to have come from construction. If you don't come from construction, it just doesn't work. So we've grown to that team of 3. We have a couple of people that do bits and pieces for us, but those 3, and we're very focused on sort of collaborating together. We're all Brisbane-based, so nice and easy to catch up. But yeah, team of 3 now. We do expect that to expand into the future. But for us, it's kind of really solidifying and getting just better and better at what we do, rather than chasing the growth too quickly as well. So that's where we're at the moment. It's a nice little team. So it's a small Christmas party, but it's a good one. We're actually planning it right now.
Yeah,
so,
good.
Yeah,
that's good. So so you're identifying, I guess, a lot more need for organisations or construction companies to optimise Procore beyond the out-of-the-box situation, so planning on growing in the future.
Yep.
Why did you choose to have people only with a construction background employed under Night Solutions?
Yeah, I think that was a very intentional decision based upon the fact that I guess it's like any industry. I mean, if you're an accountant and I walk in the room, you're going to pick that I'm probably not an accountant in about 30 seconds. So when we work with construction customers, which is the only type of customers you work with, there's an immediate bond between the 2 of us. They understand that we know what their day-to-day life is like, and we can have a crack and a joke at some of those frustrating aspects that I'm sure anyone in construction is aware of. So it builds a bond, which is really important, but they have the confidence to know that we're not theoretical in our approach. So we have in not just use this, but we've set it up, we've gone through the trials and tribulations and learnt the process, so you guys can skip those years of learning, and that expertise and that comfort and camaraderie even is a really nice formula, and people instantly are comfortable, and it leads to really great relationships. So, yeah, that is a very much a mandatory requirement. I think we'll be keeping for some time, if not forever.
Makes a lot of sense. Actually, I completely understand why you're doing that. So, what might be valuable for listeners? I know you just do primarily Procore, but you've got a lot of experience, I guess, selecting and why you would select construction software. Do you want to give a bit of a rundown on if you were in, say you owned a construction company or you were one of the partners responsible for technology and you were assessing multiple different platforms, say you're looking at Procore and a bunch of other different construction software, what would be your guide to like what to look out for example, or what to choose?
Yeah, so my advice when choosing any software for any business, but it obviously applies for construction, is kind of coming back to the principle is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So for me, there is no situation where a business buys a singular piece of software and we check the box and we never have to.
Problems.
Yeah. So we're always going to have multiple software systems, and that's in every business. But I think in construction, where you've got so much sort of, you got regulations, compliance, technical requirements. It's sort of quite a push for lots of different things you need to solve. So my first requirement would be you can go and buy the best piece of software that does every one of, let's say, 20 functions and pat yourself on the back, but you're going to run yourself into the ground. Because those systems don't talk to each other, there's no interconnection. You guys are big on data, so there's really no data sharing in any sort of real tangible way. So the first thing is you know what you need to solve because you know the problems you have. You need to find the system that ticks the vast majority of requirements firstly, but then you need to take a step back and find out, hey, how does that fit with other software that we currently use or we might use in the future? And again, I know you guys are big on this. What is the kind of digital roadmap for you guys in terms of how we're going to bring that together? And it might take a few months, a couple of years, a bit longer, who knows what it is. But it not only needs to service the need, it needs to be connected to other systems. And that's probably the biggest piece of advice. The other part is I think there's a few good offerings out there. I'm not naive. I know there's competitors to Procore. I don't think there's many competitors, if any, that really have what they have, but there are other options. I would say look at the company, look at the roadmap, look at the performance and the financial integrity as well. I know that's not super exciting, it's not really sexy, but it's super important because there is nothing worse than buying a software system that, worst case, isn't around in 5 years. Or what is almost equally as bad is a product that is effectively shelled, kind of like the Oracle acquisitions. Buy it, put it on the shelf, and there's no development work in that product. You look at it in 5 years from now, it's the same thing. So what's their roadmap of development? What's their past performance? And then, of course, look at your competitors in the market. What are they using? Are they successful? How's that working for them? So that would kind of be the three things for me, that kind of ecosystem, the company itself, good people, good performance, good track record, and what are the competitors using out there? Because most of the time you can look at leading companies in your space in construction and you can say, look, these guys are doing really well. We've heard they're using this. That's going to vote of confidence for you as well. So that would be my three things. There's a lot of other stuff, but they're the important stuff for me.
That's good advice. So apart from Procore being one of the largest and leaders in construction software, there's a bunch of other Moab has a construction suite now, for example. You can bolt on. There's a bunch of other ones out there. Why would you recommend Procore over other construction software?
Right, that's a great question. And there's probably a lot of reasons. I think we come back to those 3 points before to some degree, but I think the biggest one is that they have decided to solve for the construction team. For me, that is the biggest thing. So, if anyone hasn't worked in a construction team before, it is a pretty rough and tough industry. It is very demanding, very stressful, and there's a lot of complexity in that. And Procore has decided to, unapologetically, we're solving for construction delivery teams and pre-construction to some degree as well. Whereas I think a lot of the other solutions out there, and you use Moab. Moab's a very close partner of Procore, so I think they're a great product, but they do offer through things like MYB Advanced, they have some what you would call, I guess, bolt-on solutions. And there's other ones out there, but it's often not their primary focus. For instance, MYB has fantastic accounting systems, but construction is not their core. So with Procore, and no pun intended with the rhyming either, that's why I would choose it, because they're focused completely on construction, and unapologetically that's what they do. And the proof of that effort has come out in the product itself. So that, for me, would be the driving reason.
That makes sense. And do you do, for organisations out there, a little bit of that kind of pre-system analysis of if, say, maybe they spoke to Procore, but they're also looking at a bunch of other platforms. Do you have any of those businesses reach out to you directly and say, hey, should I go with Procore, for example?
Yeah, quite a bit. Obviously, having a lot of connection and networking in construction, I get quite a lot of that. I get a lot of people at Procore who are talking to customers and they're saying, a little bit unsure. They throw my name in the ring and say, have a chat with Rob. And as I always say, I'm happy to point the ship in the right direction for people, even if they don't come on as customers, because it is a very confusing experience sometimes. And we definitely do some of that pre-analysis. It is still quite Procore centric. It's on the assumption that you will be using Procore as a primary item. But, and as we discussed before, often companies who are buying Procore, who are kind of coming to the realization that they need to improve their technologies, it's often not just Procore. So they might need to change accounting systems at the same time. They might need a specialist on-site gated solution, or they might be looking for something else. And we can say, well, look, again, coming back to that, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. On the assumption using Procore, let's look at what's out there to solve your needs, because quite often the mix and match is a really important step to get it right. And again, going and buying the best product for every particular thing isn't the answer for you. And so we kind of review that. We do what we call a functional mapping, which is basically a summary version of that full sort of service before we look at the business and forget about the software. What do you need? What are your problems? What are your pain points? What are the staff complaining about is probably the big one. And then we bring that over and go, here's how we can solve that, and here's a couple of different options that work within that Procore ecosystem. And then, they might come forward in terms of being clients for the Procore work itself or not, but it's basically a roadmap for them on their digital technology acquisition for the next 6, 12 months, couple of years. Again, Procore centric, but obviously very helpful as well.
Makes a lot of sense. What are the main, maybe this is a selfish question, but what are the main, problems that you're hearing in the construction industry from their employees? Is it what actual issues with technology are they facing?
I think the biggest one is, and I know every industry is guilty of this, but construction is definitely a standout, is using basic tools, and Microsoft Excel would have to be at the top of the list by far and away. And it's look, I got to give credit; they are Excel wizards. What they do with it, but the biggest frustration I think comes from using a couple of basic technologies to try and solve everything. And then what happens in that process, and I love Excel, I'm not going to hide away from that, but it has its use, and then exactly. It doesn't. But what happens as a result is construction becomes an incredibly administrative process. So you go to uni, you spend 3, 4, 5 years at uni studying construction management, or maybe you did a trade and you worked your way up. And then you end up as a contracts administrator, project manager, or some sort of element of that project delivery team, and you're spending 30, 40, 50% of your day administering and processing through these redundant tools, or sort of shouldn't say redundant, but incorrectly applied tools. And, presumably you have a love of construction. That's why you're in construction. And again, it's a very visceral, rewarding, physical, I can touch it, see it. But if you're spending half your time, or sort of, even a third of your time doing administrative processes, pumping in data into sort of, not ideal systems, that's the frustration. People want to be involved in the delivery and the management and the success of the project, not pushing paper in a digital sense.
And imagine there's probably people doing the same thing. There's duplicate data. There'd be errors in the data. It'd be unbelievably inefficient. Someone might be sucking some data out of some system, creating a report. Person in the next office doing the variation of the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's kind of, and I always thought it was quite the irony, because if you work in construction, you realise how technical it is. Like from building codes to logistics to site management, there's a lot of technicality and there's a lot of innovation.
A lot of data, right?
Yeah. But the people are coming up with really creative solutions. But then the contrast is a lot of them are very outdated in terms of the technology they use for themselves.
Yeah. Okay.
But the project delivery work, the construction itself is very technical. So it's quite the irony. And it's an old school industry. I mean, I think last time I checked, it's supporting somewhere between 10.5% and 11% of GDP for Australia, and similar in most countries. So it's a huge part of the economy, but it's kind of has this ironic sort of contrast between what they do for customers and what they do for themselves. But they are kind of, I think, waking up collectively, and it's fantastic to see, because people are able to increase their total construction volume without bringing on the proportionate amount of staff, or have happier staff, or not doing your standard 6 to 6, which is pretty standard in construction. So
it's an interesting point. We have a couple architect firms as clients, and they are they're digital businesses. The technology they're using, it's a little bit different, but with all the BIM modeling, the size of the files and the data that they're working on, it requires heavy compute power. And it's very reliant on the technology. So I imagine it's similar.
It is, yeah. And I think, and I remember when I first met Tui, who started Procore and still owns, or actually they're public now, so he doesn't own it, but who started Procore, and really we really got on really well in terms of the focus of getting construction to a point where they can use technology effectively. But one of the things that we discussed together, and I've talked to many other people about it, a lot of people don't realise that in the process of construction, the best way to think about it is that every project is a prototype. So every project is a unique design. You have a unique 30 to 40 or 50 subcontractors. You have a unique set of 10 new design consultants you're working with, and half a dozen client contacts and associated consultants. And then you put all that effort in for 6, 12, 18, 24 months, and then you have to kind of re-prototype and start again. And because you have so many diverse businesses, I've often joked that it's kind of like trying to conduct an orchestra with no sheet music. You're just kind of figuring it out a lot of the time, that there hasn't been technology to support that huge diversity of stakeholders. Like you talked about accounting, the work accountants do, is pretty much inside the walls of that accounting business. Whereas construction, you're dealing with 50 sets of owners on a unique prototype. And I think in a lot of way, technology in the past failed construction, and probably not the other way around. I think it's blood on both hands, so to speak. But I think technology was pretty slow to adapt and realise to what construction is, how unique it is, and what's required. And then something like Procore, which goes unlimited users, whatever you want to have, bring them all together, will all be in one place, is obviously a really natural fit. I think that's an important aspect to consider. That is pretty unique to construction as well.
Saying that though, imagine if there was the technology like Procore is today, released 20 years ago, and in the market, people would have been like, "What the? This is unreal. We just want to."
Is it kind of like, again, not being an expert by any means, in the space, but is it kind of like the debate between ArchiCAD and Revit and Procore and the other construction software, in that it's a language, people get used to it, people want to use that software on projects. If you talk about inviting other people in, or is it really doesn't matter too much?
There is a bit of that. A product like Aconex, for instance, which has been around for a long time. I'm a fan of Aconex, if for nothing else, that it's an Australian success story. And Jasper and the team there sold out and cashed out a couple of years ago, and they did really well, and credit to them. I think something like Aconex kind of paved the way for the concept of construction software collaboration. People too get stuck in their ways, whether it's Aconex, Procore, or something else, to a degree. But I just think at the end of the day, there was just not much being offered that was really useful. And again, you probably have this in every industry. There was a plethora of point solutions. Like, you need to do defecting. Here's a fantastic app for that.
Oh, okay, right.
You need to do this. And then people would end up with a home screen on their iPhone with 15 apps. And then you go back to that same problem. I'm just spending time doing administration, getting stuck in situations. So, there would have been some resistance. I think construction is a little bit old school. They're a little bit stuck in their ways. I think that's good, to be honest. I think it's a kind of very traditional industry, which I like. But they have woken up now that the market has moved and provides something a bit more tangible, and they're communicating that well, they're selling that well, they're showing them and walking them through the options. So it is changing, albeit slowly, but I think you're seeing a lot more construction companies becoming more of that sort of digital house.
I mean, I suppose look, from my, again, limited knowledge of construction, but I mean, it's tight margins. You make a mistake, it can be the difference between
absolutely
making money or not making money. So not having that control, we joked about Excel, but like you said, Excel's a great tool, but it's really easy to, oops, we stuffed up a formula, or oops, we deleted a cell, or just, the human error, because there's not much control around a spreadsheet. So I guess the risk of not having a tool like Procore for construction companies, and when does that kind of kick in? Yeah,
well, firstly, I think Excel is kind of addictive in the way that you can kind of make it do whatever you want. So that's why people get stuck in it. But they forget about the error-prone nature itself. So I think construction companies need to find something that works a bit better for them, is a bit more specific in terms of what they're trying to find, and then align their requirements to that construction software would be the best way.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It makes sense, and you're right on what you said before, that there is so many good things like estimating tools out there and all these other tools, but if there's no integration, or you got to build the integration, you can get this massive solution where you got so many different bits of software there. It's unreal.
Yeah.
So, I really appreciate you coming in, Rob. It sounds like you're definitely an expert in your field when it comes to Procore and choosing construction software. If any of the listeners or our clients are considering changing construction software, or want to reach out to you in that pre-analysis, or want to optimize their existing Procore environment, how can they reach you?
Yeah, the best way is just to jump on the website, look us up, and shoot us an email or give me a call. My phone number is there. You can give me a call direct, and we can take it from there, whether it's a chat to point the ship in the right direction, as I said, or you need some more specific services. We're always happy to chat with anyone in construction.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming in, Rob.
Fantastic. Thank you.